Woolworths to make your Christmas.
But that's later. Also a few words of wisdom. Here's Genesis now.
The song's about a boy who leaves home, and you're not quite sure whether he's being the abused or whether his mother is being abused. But basically, father's a bit of a bastard.
Well, the key to my survival was never in much doubt. The question was how I could keep sane, trying to find a way out.
He's had enough, so he goes, leaves home. And he hopes, with the passing of time, that his father would change. And so he comes back home, hoping that his father's changed, because his father doesn't even really realise anything's going wrong. He just says, it's all your fault, you left home, you're the one that left, so get out of it, you know, I don't want anything to do with you, you're no son of mine.
You know, son of mine.
And you don't quite know really in the song just what has happened in the family, but things have gone very wrong between the father and the son. And it's a natural course to really act it out a little bit, I suppose.
Atmosphere has always been a big thing with us. We like sort of a bit of drama, you know, and it's the sort of song that starts. I like the way the song really almost gets sort of steadily louder right the way through about the first 3.5 minutes of the song. It just gets louder and louder, and just sort of steadily builds this sort of tension, and then it releases it when you get to the chorus.
They say that time is a healer.
Not many people write like we do anymore. You know, you usually get one writer in a group or two writers, and they're the main things. But we actually go in there with nothing written. We go into a rehearsal room or our studio with a blank page, and we just start playing. And over a period of months, sometimes it's 2 months, like this last album was written in 2.5 months. Sometimes it's longer, but you know, you tend to sit down and write and wait for something to happen.
Son, you know, son of mine. But where should I go? And what should I do? You know, son of mine. He said, you know, son of mine. You know, son of mine.
I think it's one of the strongest albums we've made for a long time, and I think it has some very strong atmospheres, some very strong moods, which in a way I think is probably the best part about the album for me.
I think this is good because I think it does, you know, it's got perhaps what people might call the later Genesis and some of the sort of more immediate sort of kind of things, and I think we get better and better at doing those, I think.
But at this point in the game, you know, you've got some songs which you feel really close to, and some songs you don't feel so close to because you weren't so involved in the writing of it, or you don't particularly, it reflects a side of the band that you don't particularly like as much as the other side. With this album, I think I could stand behind every track and say, yes, this is good.
Well, I rang that bell with my heart in my mouth. I had to hear what he said. He sat me down to talk to me, and he looked me straight in the eyes. He said, you know, son of mine.
In years gone by, Genesis, when we first started, was more about escapism and taking people away from real life, and what is cruelly called entertainment sometimes, but in actual fact is just actually taking people away for 2.5 hours on a stage, you know, in a concert. You take them away from all the problems that they're having, as opposed to ramming it down their throats, what the problems they're having. That's what we used to be about more, but I guess as you change as you get older or whatever, or your ideas about what music should be about changes, sometimes you incorporate different things. I mean, I've always personally written songs about what's happened to me, or what happens to you, or what happens to anybody, real situations.
You know, son of mine. When I came to her, oh, I was looking for you.
With Tony Banks and Phil Collins of Genesis. In fact, in reality, Phil, you're the Genesis. You're the baby of the group, aren't you? Because you were the last person to join.
I've only been in the group 21 years.
Only 21 years.
That's right. I'll get used to it, though.
Did you all think that you'd still be doing Genesis now? Back then in 1970 when you...
I don't think so.
No. I mean, you really. I think the way we looked at it at the time was very much a sort of one, 2, 3 year thing, maybe.
Yeah.
If you were lucky.
The way this lot were arguing as well. It was quite extraordinary that we got past the first year, really.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
There was a lot of arguments
fair
in the early days, in fact, you know.
But also, it was a different kind of music world and industry and everything, hasn't it? It's the industry itself has changed so much and progressed, and video, of course, is now here. We have a different kind of thing. But
Well, then,
Genesis somehow has survived and gone through.
That's
all
right. I
that.
mean, then it was all like going up and down the motorways, you know, doing gigs.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure still happens, but not to the same extent that it used to. I mean, that's how you made your name before the days of music television,
Yeah.
before the days of videos.
Yeah.
You just did it by live gigging, really.
But does Genesis still mean the same thing for you, each individually in your hearts, as it did when you started back then?
Well, it's a difficult question to answer that, really. I mean, you feel different as a person, you know. I think emphases have changed in your life. You know, it was absolutely, I think one's focus was very, very 100% on Genesis in those days. Obviously now there are other focuses, whether it be other parts of your career, you know, solo stuff and things, or whether it be sort of families and kids and all the other things in life. But I was feeling...
When we're doing it.
Yeah, when you're doing it, you're as intense as ever, I think. That's the point. It's just you're perhaps not quite so single-minded. You are able to see things outside that now.
Right. Well, we, as we were saying, you're going out on a world tour, but sensibly you're doing a 5-month though. We've got Dire Straits coming up now.
Who are not sensible.
2 years, off you go. You begin rehearsing, then you're off for 5 months, and I presume it's 5 months of drugs, booze, chicks,
That's right.
sort of
That's
TVs
my
out
room
there.
anyway. I don't know what's happening in his room.
Do you enjoy it? I mean, going out there and doing it again. I mean, because it's a huge tour, isn't it? I mean, there's like 60 trucks going out, and 200 people.
I don't know about all that stuff. You don't want to believe all that.
No?
I mean, there's lots of trucks and there'll be lots of people. I mean, I don't think you can pin it down to those numbers. Well, the thing I don't like about that is it always makes it sound like a huge conglomerate, you know. It's just that all it is just 3 of us. Chester and Daryl makes 5, and a few roadies, you know.
Yeah.
And there are these unseen heroes that sort of put the stage up and take it down, but they're not really part of our team.
Right.
As
So
such.
you've got like a little nucleus of people
That's
who you
right.
see and work with, and the rest of it is this thing which
Yeah.
takes it there and
That's
you
right.
That's
turn.
right.
You arrive and then you leave.
Yeah.
But it'll be good fun, yeah. I mean, there is. I think by the time we come around to the end of the tour, we'll still be enjoying it. You know?
Yeah.
And we always enjoy the shows anyway. It's just the actual travelling that sometimes.
So when you are getting prepared for this kind of tour, I mean, how many sort of songs are you thinking of rehearsing? Because you're going back with LPs way back to the 70s. I mean,
Well, I don't know about the number of songs. I can't, because our songs vary in length from sort of, you know,
Yeah.
4 to 10. And mind you, the 4-minute songs always end up being 10 minutes by the time you've done them on stage for a bit.
right.
But we'll be doing about 2.5 hours of music. And the concentration, I suppose, will be, as usual, towards the more recent stuff. But
An hour and a half introductions.
yeah, that's it. It's just tiny introductions, actually. They're longer than the songs. It goes on and on and on. But yeah, we're going to certainly do some stuff from earlier days for those people who like to hear that kind of thing. Which I do. I like it. Hey, don't get me wrong. But
Enjoy playing it.
some of it may be in the form of a medley, because you know, if we start doing sort of half a dozen songs from the early days, then that's really all we do. You know,
Yeah.
because they're all quite long.
Yeah, quite big.
So that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, some 25-minute songs, things like that.
All
So
right.
bits and pieces.
Well, great. Well, listen, I'm sure many people out there watching now will be wanting to go and see you live. So keep watching your MTV. We'll give you the tour details. Thanks for joining me here
Cheers, yeah.
today.
you.
And we're actually going to hand over right now to the current video. Jenny.
LP version of Invisible Touch recorded for their summer Nebworth concert. Welcome, Genesis.
Well, I've been waiting here so long. But thinking nothing could go wrong. And now I know she's got a built-in ability to touch everything she
most popular bands for 2 decades. Although never a favourite with the critics, they were at one time at the forefront of rock. In the 70s, their decorative stage shows and intricate musicianship reflected the educated rock movement known as art or progressive rock. Since the 80s, the band have established a very different reputation for slimmed-down pop rock, complete with snappy videos and constant sponsorship. Has the band become brand? Has art rock become corporate rock? In the third of our interviews of the week, MTV News spoke to Genesis about continuity and change in their music.
You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Do we just sit here like this, is it?
Come in, shut up. Most of the bands I've met, 80%, have been very like Genesis. But a lot of bands encourage, they try and generate an image, which I think they feel they need to generate, be it hotel wrecking or overdoses of drugs or whatever. And most of the bands are relatively normal.
I had this memory of seeing the Stones at Earl's Court in 1978 and being very close to the front and seeing Jagger project. I'd never seen Jagger before, but seeing him project way past me and become a caricature before the days of screens even. Caricature, he was like a caricature of himself, larger than life. And I said, wow, I've got to be really careful that never happens.
I look at someone in the crowd and I see a young kid of 16 and I think to myself, he's probably heard a couple of singles, come down and see the band, check it out. And then I see him singing along to the Lamb on Broadway, or some very old lyrics. And you think you shouldn't typecast your audience because you just don't know.
More like a freak or publicity stunt.
Those days we were talking about more about fantasy, trying to build up a kind of unreal world, whereas now we tend to stick more with real ideas.
Everyone looks so strange to him.
I used to read a lot of science fiction books and fantasy books. I still do, but I don't carry it into my lyric writing anymore.
Well, when I first started, in this business, I mean, the thing that excited me most about rock, what we could do with rock music, was this idea that something people weren't doing, which was just using the pieces to go from section to section and telling stories with music. Rather than feeling this need, you could have a verse and a chorus and a bridge.
I was a drummer. I wanted to show people I could play the drums, I mean, it takes much more maturity to play less than it does to play more. And over the period of time, with Abacab, in fact, we actually made a conscious decision. Listen, let's just, instead of having this huge sound, let's just do something very simple. With the advent of drum machines, which I don't feel threatened by as a drummer at all, suddenly everyone's writing changed. And technology has helped us a lot. I think it's changed our writing an awful lot. Made it, pared it down, because we can do a lot more simpler things.
In order for a band to stay together as long as we have, it's important to feel that you're not going over the same old ground and you haven't become a caricature of yourself. We're trying to throw off the thinking man's group image. And that's not quite the thinking man's group image. I'm trying to say really this image that you're actually cold and precise is what I'm against. Genesis has always felt a very natural, emotional process, the way we write and operate.
And hopefully over this long period of time we've been together, there has to be a personality, and if we didn't have something that was distinctive by now, we'd all be worried about it.
You kind of have a slight territorial area because you know that someone's better at someone else.
Out of the three of us, I'm the third. I think Tony and Mike, and Tony being the first, is probably the more what you would call, what you said about the chords, I think that's down to Tony, and then to a lesser extent Mike.
Well, I'm probably the one who's always trying to pull it kind of furthest from commerciality. I mean, that's me, I'm more interested in things that haven't been done before.
Phil, I suppose his role has changed quite a bit over the last few years he's changed in many ways, and partly because I think all the success he's had and sort of now being very much such a well-known face, it affects his life in every way.
For some people will say that we now sound like Phil's solo albums, and that's because they listen to The Voice. If you listen to The Voice, obviously, The Voice is the same. If you're a person who listens to chords, then you will say, well, there's something that runs through all of Genesis.
We all travelled back in the car last night, me, Mike and Tony, and we had someone driving, because, after the gig you had a couple of drinks and stuff. But it was like all of us in the car driving back from the north, down to London. It was just, and we've obviously done it since, you know, in the last 10, 15 years, but it's just, it does, every now and again you think, well, this is just like it used to be. This is great. But having said that, you know, after 2 or 3 weeks, you had enough of it. And, you know, you realise that it's actually nice to sort of, where you've got to, where you've progressed to, is actually a bit of a luxury, and that's great.
I hated it. I was thrown out halfway through, and thank God, actually.
I made some very close friendships, obviously with Peter Gabriel.
The best gig I've ever been to was Otis Redding in '67 when I sneaked out of school and went to this Ram Jam club in Brixton.
And I used to play the piano and he would sing, and we'd do sort of Otis Redding numbers and Nina Simone and things like that in the sort of dining room in the school.
We started doing some songwriting. There was like sort of two pairs, really, although Ant Phillips was almost involved in both. But myself and Anthony Phillips, and then Tony Banks and Peter Gabriel were another pair. We wrote material separately, and then we made our first demo tape at a friend's garage.
And so it was from that tape that we first got any interest, the interest from Jonathan King, who was an English producer, which sort of got the whole thing underway.
This is 21 years ago, and I was then a teenager. I'd just left school, went back to my old school in Triumph. The little school band, who were like 2 or 3 years younger than me, came rushing up to me and said, "Please, Mr. King, listen to our little cassette tape. We're very talented. We'd like to be made into stars, but we don't have a name." I gave them the name Genesis, recorded their first album, produced it.
Well, a typical gig would be us leaving, I suppose. We'd play one end of England one day and then the other end the next. So it would be, we'd be leaving about 8 or 9 in the morning.
Pete used to drive the gear around. He had a big London taxi. He used to drive the gear around in a taxi. I had a yellow, rusty Ford Anglia, and Tony had a little Austin A7. It was 3 cars.
We'd break down a couple of times on the way up because the van we had never made it to one place without breaking down. And then we'd do a sound check and set our own, we'd obviously, you know, at that point we were still our own roadies as well, so we'd get the gear out and set it up. And it would probably be a college or university or a small club.
And the first gig we set up in a row. 2 rows, 3 deep. It was ridiculous, you know. I had no idea what we were doing. We actually got an encore our first gig.
Well, I've managed to corner Tony and Mike, and how are you doing? How was that show? That was fantastic.
It was a dress rehearsal, and it felt a bit like it. But, you know, it wasn't bad for all that. I think it'll get better, though.
It's quite hard performing in front of sort of fans and the media. How did that feel?
It's actually probably the hardest gig you do, because it's still an audience, you know, but it's not real punters who are going to jump around and shout and scream, you know, so it's tough, but it went pretty well, I think.
How did you think Ray did today as well?
I think he did great, actually. I mean, I think for him, it's a different thing for him, because we just sit around and play our parts. Having to sort of be a front man and try and present the band and sort of push it across is quite hard with that sort of audience. I think he did really well, because in fact the other thing, we haven't actually seen him live until now. It was always a guess, really. They'd be good at it.
I think there's bound to be a large number of critics and cynics, probably, I would think, that miss Phil a lot, and I can understand that. And it's, I mean, I just get on with it, really. You know, I'm not too.
I have to say, you did a damn fine job of it, so well done.
Yes, it's gone fine. I think, you know, it's one of those things that just takes a bit of time, and I was quite pleased with the way it went today. I'm a bit voiceless at the moment, but it'll come back.
Ah,
in time.
A bit of whiskey then, that's what's needed.
Too many men, too many people, making too many problems, and there's not much love to go around. Can't you see this is a land of confusion?
The whole range of songs to choose from, which must be pretty hard to learn all that back catalogue, but you were singing sort of Phil Collins era and Peter Gabriel era. Was it weird, sort of, did you have to change your technique or style at all, singing Peter Gabriel ones and Phil Collins songs?
Yeah, I mean, it was, when I started rehearsing, there was about 6 hours worth of music that I had to learn. And to be honest, when I started, I thought, I just can't do this. It was, because you've got in your mind, you hear the way a song should sound, and subsequently you try and imitate it as soon as you try and start to sing it. So it took a little while to get over that. Once I'd got over that and made the songs my own, some worked, some didn't work at all really, and we've thrown them out and kept the ones that do.
Lies down, 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 down on Broadway, on Broadway, on Broadway, on Broadway. They say the lights are always bright on Broadway. They say there's always magic in the air.
And you looking forward to the tour?
Yeah, very much so. Actually, we've been rehearsing for quite a while now. I'm fed up with rehearsing. The funny thing is you can rehearse, if we spend another 2 weeks here, we wouldn't get any better. You actually need an audience, you know, and to start it for real in a sense.
Well, I have to say it sounded absolutely fantastic today, and thank you very much for inviting us down. Thank you. Good luck.
But I have known you for so very long. I feel like a friend. Would you do anything for me? Can I touch you for a while? Can I meet you on another day? And we will fly away. I can show you some of the people in my life. I can show you some of the people in my life, my life. It's driving me mad. Oh, it's just another way of passing the day. Oh, yeah. I get so lonely when she's not there. I must have dreamed 1,000 dreams. I've been haunted by 1,000,000 screams, but I can hear them marching feet and then moving into the street. Now, did you read the news today? Well, they say the danger's gone our way, but I can see the fire's still alight, and they're burning into the night. Well, there's too many men, too many people making too many problems, but there's not much left to go around. Tell me why this is a land of confusion. Now this is the world we live in. These are the hands we give up. Use them and let's start trying to make this a place worth fighting for. Oh. Well, there must be some misunderstanding. You know there must be some kind of mistake. 'Cause we waited in the rain for hours and you were late. Well, I've been waiting for this weekend. I thought that maybe we could see a show. Well, I never dreamed I'd have this feeling. Oh, seeing you is believing. That's why I don't know why you didn't show up that night. There must be some misunderstanding. say that emotions are something we don't share. I don't want to be sitting here trying to deceive you, 'cause you know I know that I don't wanna go. We cannot live together, but we cannot live apart. That's the situation, I've known it from the start. But every time that I look at you, well, I can see the future. You know I know that I don't wanna go. Just throwing it all away, throwing it all away. Is there nothing